Well, hello and welcome to the Ridge Community Church. My name is Jody and I'm one of the pastors that serves on staff here. Really great to be with you this week. Listen, if you are just home from work and turning us on, or maybe you're at your lake cabin because you got Wi-Fi, maybe you're even out fishing right now and you dialed us in there, or maybe you're off to a grad party in a few minutes, so you decided to do church with us first. No matter how you're here, man, thank you for spending some time with us. Good to be with you digitally, and like we do every week, we're happy to see you. Now listen, by the time we're done together today, my hope and my prayer for you is that you feel a little boost for the week ahead, and that you, in some way, shape, or form, connect with Jesus in a way that is new for you, or maybe you never expected. And if you want to connect with us here at the Ridge, maybe you want to get a resource recommended to you, you want us to pray for you in some way, or there's something else that we can do to serve you, or you want to find out more about us. The way to do that is to connect by scanning the QR you see on the screen right now. It's going to pop up a list of options. The one you want to pick is called Let's Connect, shocker. When you do that, a form will come up. It'll take you less than 30 seconds to fill out. Tell us how we can serve you and the best way we can get back to you. And no chat GPT, no AI, anything. A real live person from our team is going to get back to you because you matter to us, and we want to make sure that we serve you to the best of our ability. So you can go ahead and do that now. Okay, today we are wrapping up a series that we've been doing called Lost Cause. This is really one that's gotten at the core of our DNA as a church. And the cool part about this series is we're talking about something that was really at the core of who Jesus was and what his mission here on earth was too. We're talking about investing in people who don't yet know Jesus, who are lost, or that, in another way of saying it, just disconnected from him, and how he really prioritized those people during his time here on earth. And we're talking about ways we can do that too. Now, if you stick around for the full service today, you are going to get to see why I have toddler art with me. So, man, my kids didn't make this, but I'll explain more about why that is such a significant piece of artwork for me and why I try to look at it every day. But in the meantime, our teaching pastor is going to give us the biggest and best challenge yet when it comes to this idea of lost cause in the series that we're in. So we're going to head into the Greenfield Auditorium and hear more about this week's challenge.
Well, a few weeks ago, I was at my kid's school waiting for them to get out of school so I could, pick them up and take them home. And the bell rings, and my son, he's one of the first ones out, which is typical because he knows he can play in the playground while we wait for his sister. And so he throws the backpack at me. He runs to the playground. I'm talking to a couple parents, and I'm just starting to wait for my daughter to come out, who typically comes out a few minutes, later. But 5 minutes went by, and then 10 minutes went by. Then actually 15 minutes went by, and some of the parents are starting to leave. Other kids are starting to leave, and I'm starting to wonder, hey, where's my daughter? I dropped her off today. She should be showing up at some point. And I'm starting to get a little nervous. A few more minutes actually go on by. I'm like, what is going on? All the parents are leaving. All the kids are gone. And then finally, I'm like, maybe did she walk home? Is she, where is she? So I grab my son. I say, we got to walk to the front office. We got to find out what's going on with your sister. And right when I do that, I see her just waltzing out the door, just like acting like everything is all normal. And I'm like, Jalen, where have you been? And she's like, oh, Dad, no big deal. I just lost track of time because I lost my Harry Potter book. I couldn't find it in my locker. I couldn't find it in my classroom. I walked all the way to the library, and I accidentally left it there. And I couldn't go the whole weekend without reading Harry Potter, Dad. So, I had to go and find it. I just lost track of time. No big deal. And her focus on finding that Harry Potter book is actually in the same idea of what we're talking about as we're going throughout this series that we've been in called Lost Cause. And when we might hear lost cause in our culture today, we tend to think of this idea or maybe this person that we're like, yeah, don't put a lot of effort into that because that's a lost cause. You can maybe say my hope and dreams for the Bears winning a Super Bowl this year. That might be a lost cause. But really, what we're doing throughout this series is we're actually looking at that phrase through God's perspective, because what we see is that God actually has this huge priority for his lost cause. And Jesus actually defined his lost cause in this phrase in Luke chapter 19, where Jesus said this. He said, for the Son of Man, and Son of Man literally is referring to Jesus, who's God personified. He said, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. And that word came, that's his purpose. That's the cause and his priority for why he came, which means as his followers, this is our purpose and this is our priority as well. And that priority is to seek and to save the lost. Meaning Jesus says, my lost cause is this. Any person who is away from me, I want to do whatever I can to find them and to reconnect them to me. And this isn't a devaluing term. In fact, this is a term of value and priority, because he says it's so important. I'm going to do whatever it takes to find him. Just like my daughter just lost track of time and did whatever it took to find her book, Jesus says, I'm going to do whatever it takes to find him. This is the lost cause. Or we can define the lost cause like this. The lost cause is God's never-ending pursuit of anyone who is lost. Meaning all throughout history, God moved to find anyone who was disconnected from him, to find them and do what he can to reconnect them with him, because he wants them to experience the best life that he has to offer. And the way that he does this now, throughout this time in history, is through his followers, through you and through me. And so we get to join Jesus on his greatest priority, on his lost cause. Now, the challenge for us is this, is that as followers of Jesus, we don't want to do this in a way that will force our faith on other people. And the good news is that any non-follower of Jesus doesn't want us to force our faith on them as well. I mean, no one wants to experience this in a way where anyone feels like a project, where anyone feels like it's unnatural, it's forceful, it's dishonoring or devaluing of other people. I mean, nobody wants that. But the good news is that when we look at the life of Jesus, we see Jesus went on his lost cause, and he did this in a way that was very valuing, very loving, and very caring of those who were lost. And for those of us who are followers of Jesus, the reason why most of us are followers of Jesus is because someone came alongside of us in our life, and they treated us very loving, in a very caring way. They took care of us. They served us in a way. They helped us feel valued. And it was because of how they treated us and led us, we became followers of Jesus as well. And so this is how we can do the same thing. And so what we're doing throughout this series is we're going on a goal. And the goal is that we would take Jesus and follow him, and that we would join him on his lost cause and his never-ending pursuit of lost people. And we do this the way that Jesus did this. And so there are actually 3 steps that we challenged everyone to do throughout this series to go on this journey to be a part of the lost cause. The first step that we challenged everyone to do was to take the step to identify your one. And you start investing in your one by praying for your one at 1 p.m. Every day throughout the series. And what we mean by your one is we look at this great chapter found in the book of Luke chapter 15, where Jesus told these stories about these lost coins, and this lost sheep. And he said, we went after the lost one. And the one was a priority to him, and so the one becomes a priority for us as well. And so this could be a neighbor, a coworker, a friend of yours. We said this is anyone outside of our family, because we want to go outside of our family, because our family's a given. We want to help our family, follow Jesus, but we go outside and invest in our one. And so we said we start with identifying our one, and we invest in them, and we pray for them. The second step that we're taking is we challenged everyone to join us for a Lost Cause training huddle. And it's at these training huddles we learn these 5 practices from Jesus that we can start this summer to help build a relationship with our one, and build trust, and help them understand how much much God is for them. And it's been so cool to see so many of you join us online or join us in one of our locations and go through these training huddles. And if you miss these training huddles for any reason, here's the good news. You can still go through this training huddle. And the way that you can do this is by going to our website, and you can actually scroll to the bottom of the resource page there. We actually have all of these on-demand videos that take you through the same content that you can watch anytime and anywhere, and you can put into practice what you learn, and you can do it right here this summer to help begin to invest in your one. And the third challenge that we're going to look at today is we're going to wrap this up by looking at this third step that we can all take right away this week. Now, this step is going to feel uncomfortable for a lot of us. It's going to challenge and stretch our faith for a lot of us in very, very different ways. But this step is so important because we see Jesus do this again and again throughout his time on earth. In fact, this was one of the biggest ways that he helped many people experience his hope, and he actually accomplished his lost cause. Now, this isn't the only way, but we see Jesus doing this as the primary way. And the reason why this is the primary way is because this is the way that you can create an environment where your one will feel safe, loved, welcomed, valued, and they will have an environment where they will actually have an interaction with Jesus in a way where they don't feel condemned and they don't feel judged. And this opens them up to experiencing the hope of Jesus for themselves. And so when we do this, what's really cool is it builds our faith as well. And it's really fun because this can be done often, perhaps most often, through a meal or through a drink that you have together. And so we see Jesus do this again and again. A great example of this is actually found in Luke chapter 19, when we read about an interaction that he has with a man named Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus is actually this chief tax collector in the Jewish community back then. And we've talked a little bit about tax collectors throughout this series. They are seen as like the bottom of the moral ladder in their community back then. I mean, they're considered the worst of the worst. And the reason for that is they would collect taxes from the Jewish people. They would give it to the Roman Empire. And so they were viewed as these traitors, but they also charged more than what was worth. They pocketed the difference. And so they were viewed as these thieves as well. And so everyone in their community just cast them aside. And we might get numb to this at first because our culture today, we don't have tax collectors like this. I mean, this is so much more than someone who works for the IRS. I mean, I want you to actually begin to understand how they viewed Zacchaeus back then. And here's how they viewed him. I want you to draw up to your mind someone in your mind who you would consider to be the worst of the worst. I mean, they are at the bottom of the moral ladder for you. They've done something that you would consider unforgivable. Maybe you would deem them unlovable. I mean, think about them in your mind. I mean, this is the only time you're going to hear from me to think of a person and judge them in church. So let's take advantage of that opportunity. I mean, who is that person to you? And I want you to think about that person and think about how you would respond by Jesus interacting with this person as we look at how Jesus interacts with Zacchaeus throughout the story. And here's how Luke begins to describe this interaction. He says he wanted to see who Jesus was. He was Zacchaeus, but because he was short, and we actually don't really know if the text is really referring to Zacchaeus being short or Jesus being short, but someone is short, and because of that, Zacchaeus could not see over the crowd because the crowd wants to keep Zacchaeus from Jesus because he's this tax collector they're casting aside. And so Zacchaeus ran ahead, he climbed a fig tree up to see him, and since Jesus was coming down that way, when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up to Zacchaeus and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." And the crowd heard this, like, what? Why would he say this? Because we would expect him, if he's going to acknowledge Zacchaeus at all, he should just tell him about all of the wrong things he's done. He should guilt him. He should condemn him. But the crowd, they're trying to keep Zacchaeus away from Jesus, but Jesus is just like, no, I got to come hang out with you. Let's spend time together. And this went so against the grain of their culture back then, because back then, meals were seen as this huge deal. I mean, it's a big deal today to invite someone over for a meal and have someone over at your house. But back then, this was such a huge deal because it revolved around what they would call boundary markers. And a boundary marker was just simply this, was that it was your social circle. And that if you were to hang out with them, if you were to invite them into your home or go to someone else's home and share a meal together, you would say that we are together in the same social circle. I associate myself with you, you associate yourself with me. And so by Jesus inviting himself over to Zacchaeus' house, he's telling him, hey, we're boys. And the crowd's hearing this, and they're thinking, wait, you're a Jewish leader. You're this religious leader. You should not be in the same boundary marker as this tax collector, as this worst of the worst. This doesn't make any sense. It goes against the grain of what they would think Jesus would want to do and who he'd want to spend time with. And they don't know how to process this. In fact, if we were to go back to the person that we brought up in our mind just a couple moments ago, and you deemed that person the worst of the worst, and you were thinking about that person, I want you to now imagine Jesus going over to that person's house and sharing a meal with them and having a drink with them and spending time laughing and talking and building a friendship. What type of emotions does that raise up in you? Does it make you angry, scared, confused? I mean, this crowd, they're experiencing all of those emotions, especially when Zacchaeus, he hears the offer and he takes Jesus up on it. And we read that Zacchaeus came down at once and he welcomed Jesus gladly. And this is just fascinating, is that those who were nothing like Jesus actually wanted to be around Jesus. They liked being around him. And the crowd, they saw this and they began to mutter and complain. They said, wow, Jesus has gone to be the guest of a sinner. And they thought, if Jesus is going to hang out with anybody, he should be hanging out with us because we're like him. Why would Jesus go and hang out with someone that is nothing like him, that is really morally at the worst of the worst? And at least if he is going to spend time with him, he should at least tell him like all of the bad things that he's done. And Jesus knows that Zacchaeus knows all the bad things he's done. And by having this meal with him, what Jesus is showing Zacchaeus is that to Jesus, Zacchaeus matters more to him than the things that Zacchaeus has done. And Jesus knows this about having a meal with someone. He knows that it begins to build trust. It begins to build this relationship. It begins to open someone up where you begin to feel understood and safe. And it's in this type of environment that your heart begins to shift. And what we read and what we see is that by Jesus spending this time not condemning Zacchaeus, but by loving him and welcoming him, Zacchaeus' heart really does begin to shift. Here's what happens at that meal. Zacchaeus stood up and he said to Jesus, "Look, Lord." It's fascinating. He's calling him Lord now. Lord means master. Zacchaeus is choosing to follow him. He says, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor." He was known for stealing from his people. Now he's going to be generous. And he says, "And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." And 4 times is very significant because in their law back then, what would happen is if someone took something from someone else, what the law said was that you were to pay back 4 times the amount, not for justice, but for the relationship to be restored. And so for Zacchaeus to make this claim, to state this, he's saying, I want to reconnect with God, and I want to reconnect with God's people and be a part of God's family again. And here's what we're seeing. Zacchaeus, who was once lost, is now being found. And Jesus, he celebrates this moment. And he actually responds to what Zacchaeus is saying here. He says, hey, Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham." And Jesus is not making a small statement with that phrase, son of Abraham. He's saying, here's what's happening. He says, the Jewish people, they try to cut you off, because you were a tax collector and you were considered the worst of the worst. But in this phrase, Jesus is reconnecting him with God's family, and he's reconnecting him with God. He says, Zacchaeus, you were lost, but now you are found. And then it was after this moment, Jesus gives us his purpose statement that we talked about earlier. He said, here's what happens. The Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. And Jesus is saying, hey, here's what happened right here. My lost cause in this moment was Zacchaeus. The lost cause was fulfilled. Zacchaeus was found, and it wasn't done through guilt or condemnation. It was done through welcoming and loving and serving over a meal at Zacchaeus' house. I really appreciate how John Mark Comer, who's a pastor and author, summarizes this passage. And he summarizes it like this. He says, for Jesus, meals weren't a boundary marker, but rather they were a sign, an opportunity of God's great welcome into the kingdom. They weren't a way to keep people out, but rather they were to invite people in. That Jesus would use meals and drinks and opportunities to gather together to invite people in to his kingdom to help the lost become found. And what's so important to understand about this interaction with Zacchaeus is that this wasn't an exception to Jesus' rule. This was an example of Jesus' rule of life. Whenever you read about Jesus and you see story and story and story after him, we see Jesus do this again and again. He would go and be with anyone who was not like him, and he would spend time with them. He would eat with them, share a drink with them, and he would invite them into his kingdom because he was about the lost being found. In fact, the Jewish leaders back then, they were so jealous of Jesus, they wanted to stop his growing movement, that they were willing to try to find anything they could find on Jesus to accuse him of so that people wouldn't follow him. And the only thing that they really could accuse him of was the fact that Jesus was hanging out with people who weren't like him, that they were breaking the boundary markers. And Jesus, he heard that, and he owned it. He said, yeah, I am. He said, here's what's going on. He said, the Son of Man came eating and drinking. And the first part of that phrase should sound familiar because he said earlier, the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. That was his purpose statement, the lost cause. Here he's stating how he did it. He's like, here's how I did it. Eating and drinking. And you say, yeah, here's a glutton and a drunkard and a friend of tax collectors and sinners. And he'd say, yes, that's exactly what I am. I'm a friend of them because I am about the lost being found. And I'm going to welcome them through meals and through drinks together. And he says, this is how I can help the lost be found and fulfill the lost cause. And this act that Jesus is demonstrating here is the act of hospitality. And it's such an incredible act for us to be able to join Jesus in the lost cause. And hospitality in our culture today actually falls a little short than what Jesus and how Jesus would actually define hospitality then. Because hospitality is more than just being a great host, and it's more than throwing a great party, although that's a part of hospitality. But back when Jesus, in his culture back then, they would define hospitality like this. They would say the hospitality is the love and welcome of strangers. Meaning we are going to go outside of our boundary markers to help the lost be found. And so we aren't going to just love and welcome our close family circle or our close friends, but we're going to step outside of our boundary markers to love and welcome them so that they can understand how much Jesus is for them. For us today, this means we're going to step outside and we're going to practice hospitality to the neighbors that we don't know their names yet. You know, we're going to spend some time getting to know their names and welcome them. To the coworker that maybe we've just said hi to, or maybe the parents that their kid plays on the same baseball team as our kid. We just haven't yet talked to them, but it's an opportunity to extend and practice hospitality towards them. And a definition of hospitality that I really appreciate comes from an author, Henry Nouwen, that really gives us this helpful look into what hospitality really is. And that is, hospitality is the creation of a free space where the stranger, the one that we don't know, can enter and become a friend instead of an enemy. And it's important to realize that hospitality in this sense is really different than just entertainment. Because for some of us, we might think of hospitality and we might think, oh, I can't play a part in that because I'm not Martha Stewart. And I don't have a 4,000 square foot home, and I don't have all the fine dining, pieces, and I don't have all the conversation pieces in my place. I can't really entertain that well. I can't really practice hospitality. But if that's what hospitality is, that would write a lot of us off. That would write me off because I have a small home that's not really, really entertaining. It's a 1,000 square foot home that definitely would have written Jesus off because he didn't have a permanent home where he could invite people in and entertain them. But what we see is that hospitality is very different than entertainment of guests. Because when we look at entertainment in our culture today, entertainment, it boils down actually around the idea of exclusion, where we would just invite people in our boundary marker, our close circle of friends, and we bring them in because we want to look good and even move up the social ladder. In fact, we do this by inviting our guests and we perform for them. And it's about this idea of performance to look good and to show off and to show them how good we can treat them. And then ultimately, we look at entertainment. It's this form of reciprocity where we would think, hey, if I do this for you, then one day you could do this for me, or maybe you could help me move up in the social ladder. But hospitality is very different. Hospitality, rather than excluding others, it actually is very inclusive, where we go outside of our social circle, and we go outside of our boundary markers, where we invite those who may be new or strangers to us. And we do this not out of performance, we do this out of service, where we seek to add value to them and to one another. And as we seek to do this, we aren't expecting anything back in return. We're doing this out of a spirit of generosity where we want to give and love and welcome and serve them. And what we see is that Jesus did this again and again and again. As he was doing this, his lost cause was being fulfilled because he was welcoming and loving and serving those who were lost, and he was helping them be found. And Jesus didn't just stop with himself. He said as his followers, he wanted his followers to do the exact same thing. And we read about the early church and their commands and their teachings to one another about how to practice hospitality. Paul, one of the early church leaders, he actually wrote to a church and he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to share with the Lord's people who are in need, and I want you to practice hospitality. And the idea of practice there is this idea of working and straining really hard for it. It would be, imagine if you are on a run and you start sprinting really hard. Or if you're weightlifting and you get to that spot where you're going to lift that heavy 1-rep max and you're going to lift with all you have. That's the idea of practice. We want to make this practice of loving and welcoming others by practicing hospitality. Peter, one of Jesus' closest friends, he actually continued this idea, and he shared this with other followers of Jesus, where he said, I want you to offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. And that phrase right there, that's for all the introverts like me. Where we think about our home, we're like, oh, I just need that as my safe space where I can go and recharge. I mean, I'm there with you. That's how I view my house. And he says, no, we don't want to grumble about this. We're going to offer and love and serve others without grumbling, because when we do this, we actually go ahead and we help join Jesus in his lost cause, and we help the lost become found. In fact, when these early church leaders wrote this to followers of Jesus, we see them do exactly that. And what we read about the early church is that from the very beginning, for the first 300 years of the early church, we see this church movement grow from just a handful of people to actually over half of the population of the Roman Empire become followers of Jesus. And think about what they didn't have back then. They didn't have a church building that they could meet in. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have government protections taking care of them. In fact, the government was so against them that they were persecuting them. They were wanting to wipe that movement out because they didn't want people to turn away from worshiping the Roman gods. But yet, people after people after people, they started realizing the hope and the life and the love that Jesus offers, and they made the decision to follow Jesus, and this movement kept growing, and it kept growing one meal at a time, one drink at a time, one visit at a house at a time. And then we see shortly after that, the creation of hospitals and hostels end up being created by followers of Jesus. And what's the root word of those words there? Hospitality. And it's a result of what happened. As followers of Jesus loved and welcomed and served strangers, they realized here were some needs that they had. We got to meet these needs. The sick need a place to go to get healthy. Those who are traveling need a safe place to stay while they are traveling to their destination. Let's meet their needs. Let's serve and welcome and love them. And what happened? Many, many people experienced the hope and love of Jesus, and the lost were being found. Now, just imagine what would happen if followers of Jesus were known for their hospitality today like they were back then. John Mark Comer, he writes about it like this, and he just says this about our opportunity. He says, if there was ever a time to rediscover our ancient heritage of radically ordinary hospitality, and yes, he uses that phrase intentionally, like this is so different and counterculture, to offer hospitality, but yet it's so simple, but so profoundly effective when we do this, when we just welcome and love and serve those outside of our social circle. He says, the time is now. In our time of widespread loneliness, political polarization, and as we pick up the pieces from a global pandemic, digital civil war, and a year plus of social distancing, that when we get into the practice as followers of Jesus of offering and welcoming and loving and serving those outside of our social circle, think about the differences it could make. It could take out the loneliness epidemic. When we introduce people to Jesus, it can free them from their anxiety. It can heal relationships. It can restore people when they experience the hope of Jesus. And it's just done through a simple act of hospitality. And so, as we begin to wrap up this series and we begin to look at how we can join Jesus on his lost cause to help the lost be found, here's the third step that we want to challenge everyone to take. We want to challenge everyone to practice hospitality. And here's how you can get started with that this week. As summer is kicking off now, as school is letting out, we can put this into practice. And so this week, here's what I want you to do. I want you to invite one person who you know who isn't a follower of Jesus over for a meal. And you just invite them over, and you spend some time, and go outside of your boundary markers, outside of your social circle. Go outside of your family, go outside of your close friends, but invite someone over. Maybe it's that neighbor, that you don't know real well. Maybe it's that coworker, or maybe it's that person that you meet at the gym and you bump into. Just invite them over and say, hey, let's have a meal together. Now, you might be thinking, whoa, hold on. I don't have a good house, and I can't cook. Like, I destroy macaroni and cheese. It just doesn't work out for me. Invite them over to a restaurant or a bar for coffee or something, or a drink in the driveway. Just invite them over to something. And then if you're nervous of like, well, what do we talk about? Like, do I bring up Jesus right away? As I kind of like serve them the meal, like, hey, Jesus gave this for you. Let's eat of that. No, don't. The goal isn't to bring up Jesus right away. If Jesus comes up naturally, that's fine. But the goal is to begin to get to know them, build a friendship, build trust, welcome them, serve them well, and begin to show them what Jesus is like over a meal by how you serve them and spend time with them. And if you're still wondering, well, what do I say and what do I do with that? Well, we have a resource that I'm going to talk about how you can get that in just a moment that will help give you ideas of how you can invite them over, what you can talk about, and give you some different ideas of how you can practice hospitality and do this with this person who isn't yet following Jesus. Now, if you have been doing this and if you've experienced the benefits of this and you've experienced your faith grow as you've been stretched to do this, here's my challenge for you, because none of us, we all want to take more steps this summer. This is a great opportunity for us. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go one more. And here's what I mean by that. If you invite someone over once a month and you use this as an opportunity to practice hospitality, go one more and do twice a month. If you do this once a week, will you pick 1 week in a month that you would say, hey, I'm going to do 2 this week. And we're just going to want to increase our opportunities to practice hospitality. And here's why I want to do this. This summer is such a huge opportunity for this. We see a really cool opportunity that if we do this, we could actually see God begin to transform our community and help many, many people find him throughout the summer. And here's what we mean. We know that there's probably going to be about 2,000 people that are going to hear this throughout all of our services and all of our locations and online throughout the week. And these are about 2,000 individuals throughout Southeast Wisconsin. And if we all take this commitment to practice hospitality, and let's say if we just did once a month for 3 months of summer, that would be over 5,000 acts of hospitality that would be done through the Ridge through this summer. And just think about it. When we see those opportunities like what Jesus did with Zacchaeus, there's a whole lot of life change that could potentially happen. Our communities could be transformed just through the simple acts of hospitality over a brat and a drink. I mean, who knows, what could happen over there? And it could be so, so simple if we all take that step and we do this together. And so here's what I want you to do. I want you to take this challenge and to join and be a part of 5,000 acts of hospitality this summer as we go on this pursuit to find those who are lost and help them reconnect with God. I want you to do this by pulling out your phone, and you actually just text the word LOST to that phone number, 414-509-0339. And when you do that, you're going to let us know that you are in, and you're committed to this, and we're going to text you back some resources that you can use to help you practice hospitality well. Now, as you pull out your phone and you're texting that, you might see that over what might look like a dirty backyard, and you're wondering, hey, is that a mistake that's going on over there with that picture? And the answer is no, it's not a mistake. That's actually my backyard that's going on there. And here's why I wanted a picture of my backyard here. A couple years ago, my wife and I were able to move into our house, and we were so blessed to be able to do so. But back then, we confused hospitality with entertainment. And we didn't consider our home to be, host worthy. We were just like, people wouldn't like being over at our place because it's a 1,000 square foot home, small living room, small kitchen. But we heard this challenge about what it means to practice hospitality and to welcome strangers. And we said, you know what? Let's take it. Let's invite people into our backyard over the summer. And so we started that out. We started getting to know our neighbors, and we just invited them over for a drink. And here's what we began to experience in our backyard over those years. I've had some guys over for a fire and a couple drinks. They started opening up and sharing some insecurities that they'd never shared with other people ever. My wife has had moms over with their kids, and the kids are playing on that playground, and the playground that my father-in-law and I built, and we just pray every day that it'll hold together while the kids are playing on it. But while they're playing on it, the moms are actually talking to my wife, and they're sharing deep stuff, questions about God, questions about parenting. And my wife's had more spiritual conversations in the backyard there than she's had in a very, very long time. We've had couples over that we've gotten to invest in, and they've actually started asking questions about God. We've seen couples open the Bible for the very, very first time in our backyard. And as we've been seeing this, we've been seeing God do this. It's not just about what God's doing in them. God's been transforming us as well. And our faith has been growing, and our marriage has gotten stronger as we've been pursuing God and investing in our neighbors this way. And it's just been so incredible to see God and experience God move through just taking this simple step of practicing hospitality. And that's what we want for you as well, to experience God in this way as you join him on this lost cause. And so take the challenge. Take out your phone, text the word LOST to that phone number, sign up, get the resources, and let's commit to doing this together as we take this third step and we go and we commit to practicing hospitality, and we play a huge part in our community experiencing this life change. Hey, as we're doing this, let me pray for us. God, to see just how much you love us by sending your son to come and to save us and to find us when we are lost. And God, you have given us this hope and this new life, this full life in you. And God, we are so grateful that you've actually invited us to play a part in other people's stories by asking us to join you in this lost cause as well. And so, God, as we commit to following the ways of Jesus right now, we just pray, God, that you would just bring the right person to our mind right now. And God, that we would take the step and we would invite them over for a meal this week. And God, that they would come. And God, whether it's over a meal or over a drink, I pray, God, that you would build a friendship, you would build trust, you would build the opportunity to help influence someone to experience the hope that you bring. And God, I pray that you would move in us and through us as we take this step. And God, more importantly, I pray, God, that you would move in and through those that we invite, that you would help them experience just the great love that you have for them, that they would begin to see themselves the way that you see them. And that's not someone who's lost. That is someone who is loved and found by you. And so, God, we commit to taking this step, and we pray, God, that you would just do this incredible work in us and through us. We thank you for Jesus for making this possible. It's in his name that we pray. Amen.
just one word, you hear what's broken inside me. Oh, just one word, the darkness has to retreat. Oh, just one touch, I feel the presence of heaven. Oh, just one touch, my eyes are open to see. My heart can't help but believe. There's nothing that our God can't do. There's not a mountain that He can't move. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. We sing just one word. Oh, just one word. You hear what's broken inside me. Oh, just one word, and you revive every dream. Oh, just one touch, I feel the power of heaven. Oh, just one touch, my eyes are open to see. My heart can't. Come on, we sing this out. There's nothing that our God can't do. There's not a mountain that He can't move. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. No, there's nothing that our God can't do. There's not a prison wall He can't break through. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. No. Come on, let's sing this out together. We sing, I'll believe. I will believe for greater things. There's no power like the power of Jesus. Let faith arise. Let all agree. There's no power like the power of Jesus. Come on, we say, I will believe for greater things. There's no power like the power of Jesus. Let faith arise. Come on, let all agree. There's no power like the power of Jesus. I will believe for greater things. There's no power like the power of Jesus. Let faith arise. Let all agree. There's no power like His power. There's nothing that our God can't do. Come on. There's not a mountain that He can't move. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that Jesus can't do. Oh, nothing that our God can't do. There's not a prison wall He can't break through. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. No. Come on, let's lift His name up.
Well, thanks for experiencing that with us. And when I hear our band sing over and over that refrain, there's nothing that our God can't do, it makes me think of this photo. This is something that I guess I'm sharing with you that I keep in my office and look at the Ridge here when I come to work every single day. And for me, I thought it would be fun to share why this means so much and why it's proved to me that there really is nothing God can't do. About 10 years ago, we moved into the neighborhood we live in now. And we slowly over time got to know this one other family. We went through eventually some really good highs together and lots of low lows. And as we went through and just did life with them and continued to invest in them because they didn't know Jesus, we started to develop this sense of trust. And over years, it took a long time, they started to consider the idea of a relationship with Jesus. And just recently, 2 of the 4 not only made a decision to follow Jesus, but made the decision to get baptized and go public with their faith. And for us, it was just this sense of like disbelief that our ones, the people we had invested in and loved for so long, had really seen a tangible life change because of Jesus. Well, the youngest kiddo in that family is the one who drew this lovely piece of artwork for me, probably like 8 or 9 years ago. And at the time, I couldn't throw it away, and I didn't know why. And what I came to realize now is that there was just something about seeing this up in my house. At first, I had it taped up with the rest of my kids' artwork because they were all little at the time, and there was lots of stuff like this. And now you can see the paper's kind of faded. It's kind of beat up construction paper, but I wanted to frame it and keep it because it's a reminder to me to keep investing in that family and how special they are to me and how long I've been praying for them, because now the kiddo who made this is big and tall and would laugh at this. But my prayer is that someday God opens a door for this person to, again, make a personal decision to follow Jesus, and that I can give this back to them on the day that they get baptized. And it's going to be like, look how long I've been praying for you and just praying for God to move in your heart and open doors for you and for your family. And so whoever this is in your life, man, I really pray that you accept Tyler's challenge to just invest in them in whatever way feels right for you or for your family or for your kids. This is stuff we are all living on mission together for. And, you know, one of the things that's so remarkable is that when we partner with God to invest in the people in our lives, we change to our faith comes to understand that there really is nothing God can't do. He moved in the lives of some of our ones, and it's cool to see that happen and just get affirmation and our faith change and our dependence on God grow too. Well, you should hopefully know by now that as a church, we're going to do whatever we can do to partner with God to queue up opportunities so that it's easy for you to either invest in your one or maybe someday invite them to church as well. And we have one of those opportunities coming up next week. Get ready. I don't know. This has just been in the works a long time, and we're super excited to let you know that the Bucks GM, John Horst, is going to be here for Father's Day at the Ridge. So again, like I feel like we need some alarm bells going off or some confetti or something. But John Horst, the Bucks GM, is going to be here next week. He will be here on YouTube, online with us, but he's also going to be at our physical locations. He and Mark are going to do a Q&A live on our stage. And here's the thing, if you've been living under a rock and you don't know how big of a deal this is lately, let me kind of like cast some vision. Not only was he a part of creating the culture and the team that was able to win a world championship and really just have a thriving culture behind the scenes as well, but in the last couple of days, he's literally led the charge to find a new head coach and sign a new head coach for the Bucks as well. So there's been a lot going on. He's going to talk leadership. Yeah, he's going to talk about family, of course, and being a husband and a great dad, but he's going to talk about how his personal faith in Jesus weaves into each piece of who he is. So the dads and the guys in our lives, man, they are going to get a ton out of this. So I want you to invite your one or invite a whole bunch of your ones to join us next week. And listen, if you want to send them the link from the YouTube video, that's awesome. But if you want to come in person and you've never done that before, this is a really good week to pick, because at both of our physical locations, we're going to have basketball games. We're going to have like this crazy photo booth idea. We've never tried anything like this before, but we think the guys are actually going to like this one and want to do it on their own. We'll see if they'll let their families be in the pictures with them. That's your little clue, but it's going to be all Bucks themed out and super fun. So join us in person and online. Invite your one, all the things you need to know. Bucks GM John Horst. That's the word. That's the invite. So again, why do we do stuff like this? Because again, we want to make it easy for you to invite your one to be with you and to experience all of this and maybe consider church or faith in a way that they never, ever, ever would have if we wouldn't have done it. So grateful to John that he's going to be here and open that door for me and for you to invite some people to be with us next week. As you consider who you're going to make a note on your phone to invite when we're done today, I also want to pause just for a moment in service for a time of offering. And this is our chance to be grateful to God and honor him for all of the things that he gives us in our life and to give back just a small portion to him. So you're going to see the ways to give on the screen. Let's do this together, and then I'll be back to wrap us up. Well, thank you for doing that. Okay, as we wrap up, usually we ask you to do one key thing and one key takeaway every week. I'm totally breaking the rules. I have two this week. Okay, the first thing that we want everybody to do together is to really accept the challenge from Tyler to either commit to having a one if you haven't yet, or to show more efforts of hospitality and more instances of hospitality this summer. So you can find out more about that at the website that you see on the screen right now. Okay, so that's one thing. The second thing is what we just talked about a moment ago. It's that Bucks GM John Horst is going to be here next week. Easiest invite you'll ever have for Father's Day at the Ridge. So send them a social media graphic. We've got Facebook events you can use as invites. You can go to our website and find out more. But again, the main headline here is the guy that leads our World Championship Bucks team and really set the pace and the culture of that winning tradition to come back to Milwaukee. He's going to be here next week. And we're going to hear more about him personally, his journey, his leadership, and I'm sure he'll have a tidbit or two about the Bucks as well. So we'll see you next week with your one for a very special Father's Day here. And until then, may you bring the hope of Jesus with you wherever you go. Have a great week.
This love is bio, bio. You got me reaching